Ask anyone in a content leadership position how to go about building a content strategy, and I'm thinking they'll tell you something about being as focused as possible. More focus is better content. You don't want to boil the ocean. You want to make sure you're locked in on who your audience is at all times. But what happens when you have a lot of different audiences to create content for? That is what I brought Jennifer Harris, Director of Marketing at MindStream Analytics, onto the show today for. She's the first guest on Content Head. She deals with a lot of verticals for her business, has to create content for all kinds of different audiences. Same topics, but built out for different types of industries. And so I wanted to talk to her about how she goes about planning that and how she thinks through the challenges. You're listening to the Content Head podcast with me, Joe Michalowski. In each episode, I'll talk through one concept you should know if you want to build a sustainable content engine for your B2B tech company. Listen in for lessons on how small, scrappy marketing teams can use content to drive more pipeline and revenue. Thanks for joining me to nerd out about all things content strategy. Let's get into it. All right, Jennifer, it is wonderful to have you here on the show. Before we get into main topic, do you mind just introducing yourself, give a quick background, who you are, the work you're doing now, all that kind of stuff?
Absolutely. So I'm Jennifer Harris. I'm currently the Director of Marketing for MindStream Analytics. We're a full-service EPM/CPM software implementation firm, and I am really just trying to pioneer a lot of different content verticals. I have experience in marketing for the past 20 plus years. I have experience across a wide variety of industries, but most recently I've been in the EPM/CPM space for about 5 years now.
Love that. I know we talked originally about we never called ourselves a CPM, but if you looked at G2 reviews, that's where they put us.
Yeah.
But I've worked at a company called Mosaic, so we got to commiserate on that kind of life. So we'll get into that a little bit. But you mentioned working in multiple verticals. That's really what kind of we chatted about using this discussion for. I do want to get to a lot about the content strategy behind selling multiple verticals. But before we do, I just want to zoom out a little bit, talk about the types of content that you focus on creating. And so where I'll put this is evergreen content versus kind of just in time, trend based, trying to hit the moment, be, I don't know, viral or something. Where do you stand on this? What is most helpful to you in your own content strategies?
So really what I have been doing is I go to my teams and I speak to them first about what they're hearing from customers currently. What are people wanting in the moment? And then we go ahead and develop a content strategy based off of that. Our primary is webinars first, blog posts, and a few other things, but case studies based on specific verticals. If we're needing something, say in the manufacturing space or health sciences space, we will develop content around that. But from there, I take whatever we're doing in the moment and turn that into evergreen content on our website. Okay. So kind of a dual strategy.
Can you tell me more about what does evergreen mean to you, and what is the goal there for kind of getting it to have some lasting staying power there?
So for sure, our blog posts have within the industry become kind of a source of knowledge for people. And we've heard that from a lot of different folks. They search out our content on specific knowledge areas and use us as a source to learn. So that's a great feeling for me as a content provider, but also our webinars. So those are massive for us and generate a lot of interest content that people come back to and watch the replays for years on end. Because in the EPM/CPM space, yes, there are things that change, but there are plenty of things that don't really evolve. And the basis of what we're doing in this space, a lot of the general overviews work, a lot of other content still works years later. So having that content sitting there on your website for anyone to access at any time is a massive plus.
Yeah, I was in the same boat. I don't know, maybe it's for the finance audience specifically, but it's the actual processes for these people probably haven't changed in 15 plus years. Like it's a lot
Mhm.
of really nuanced work. They had a lot of staying power for us as well. And it was just like, there's so much technicality, complexity, and the nitty gritty of what those folks do that I think getting something on the website, it's not outdated a month from now. Like we can make tweaks and things, but these people are not overhauling processes and mindsets every day, you know? So I was in the same boat. I want to key in on something you mentioned. You talked about the webinars. I had a lot of successful webinars in my last company. I think webinars have a bad name in marketing land because they're usually like, at least in what I was trying to rail against for hours, was like they were kind of just like thinly veiled product demos. And so you'd promise someone this big guide to something, and then a lot of companies will just make it a demo. I'm curious, like what you're having a lot of successful webinars. What do they look like? How do you think about what is valuable to your audience? If it is a product demo, how do you make it kind of cut through that expectation that webinars are, I don't know, they're just, people don't love them anymore. But I had success. So I'm curious how you are as well.
So we try to make it as informational as possible. Usually, if someone has gotten to the point of signing up for a webinar, they're already looking for information on
Mm,
whatever the subject is. And we don't try to bait and switch them.
yeah,
We're pretty upfront and give very detailed webinar descriptions so that people know what they're signing up for. Give a full agenda and everything for people to look at so that there's buy in there already. Additionally, I would say that we also really try to maximize it for them by creating our CPE certification.
love it.
That's invaluable, yes, because people are always looking for those credits.
Yes.
So that also has become a draw because we became CPE certified in the past year. So all of our online webinars are now, it is only for the live event currently. However, that's a good way to motivate people to get to your live webinar.
Totally.
And then if you promote that content and say that CPE is only eligible for that live event, that also means for future webinars, they know that if they show up to the live event for another subject,
Yeah.
they'll get that credit.
We were in the same boat. We weren't CPE certified. Actually, I'm
Mhm.
realizing, so I mentioned this at the beginning, that you and I could commiserate on the finance audience. The CPE is like accounting credits. To keep your accreditation, you have to do ongoing training or education. And so someone in my boat or Jennifer's boat talking to this audience, being able to make your webinar count as one of those credits is just something you have to keep up with. And so I think, I don't know how that extrapolates to other industries, but I'm sure like the general takeaway for me is like, if you can find ways to tie into like industry certifications, or if you can make it broader, that's why, you know, the classic like HubSpot Academy, anytime you give someone a badge or like some kind of something, the CP is very official, but even unofficially, if you can give them something to sort of hang their hat on, I think that is helpful. All right, I've gone completely rogue from where I wanted to go with this, but I will get it back because I think what I found very interesting about your situation in particular was this like multiple verticals thing. And so what I told you, like when we chatted the first time, was I was very specifically in one vertical. And so I have a lot of personal experience just like going all in on like one audience and one set of people. Can you give me like a high level overview of how you think about content strategy when there are multiple verticals to serve with different needs and different potential ICPs?
Yeah, certainly. So, a good example of this would be we have a wide amount of customers that are specifically from manufacturing or retail. And those are very specific needs within our space. I would say this applies to multiple different industries. If you're B2B and you're trying to appeal to a wide variety of customers, the best way to get in their brains and their heads and be memorable is to speak specifically to their vertical. Tell them what problems you're going to solve for them. Make them specific to that vertical.
Yep.
Manufacturing is one example of that. Healthcare is another one. You know, we're talking about patient data. We're talking about insurance. in a variety of different KPIs that would be tracked. Speak to that when you're talking to those specific customers.
When you think about, I know you're a solo content person, so I know like I was in the same situation. It's kind of a fly by the seat of your pants at many times. Do you have like, I've worked in situations where I haven't had a documented strategy, like we're really just like I have a high level idea of what I want to do and it's more tactical. Like, do you have an outline of how all of this comes together, or is it really just like you are the content function and you are building things to serve broader needs as you, I mean, I think earlier you talked about discussing with the rest of the team, like what do people need right now? Like, or are you documenting sort of like long term where you're trying to get to with each of these verticals?
So I would say there is some level of long-term strategy, but as a company, our mindset has always been to be very agile-minded. And so we really, again, listen to the pulse of what people are wanting at a specific time and then try to develop that. And sometimes it's very fast moving and other times it's not. For example, we learned of a competitor that is beginning to phase out a specific portion of their platform. And that's a good end for us with those customers who are now looking for a replacement. We knew this way ahead of time. So we've been able to enter a long-term strategy to address that. But we have a year ahead of time to develop that strategy. And it's something that we've been able to talk about and strategize with our main platform partner company, that we implement for.
That's
Um,
awesome.
yeah, so there's definitely some long-term strategies involved, but I would say on a day-to-day basis, we're very agile-minded. So, for example, we've seen a dropout in mid-market business for one of our practices recently. So we're strategizing, hitting those customers who are either enterprise level or SMB, that small, maybe even smaller than medium-sized business, to try and make up that difference, because right now mid-market just is not hitting no matter what we do. And we've heard it from other partners as well. So
Nature of the
being able
game.
to adjust your strategy in that moment is extremely needed
Yeah.
in order to survive.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. I remember like when I was at Mosaic, it was when I first got there, it was like a big push from leadership. Like, we need a strategy. Like, everyone wants to talk about like the big strategies. So I spent a ton of time putting this really long, like, document together about what we were going to do. But we were like a Series A startup at the time. Like, it got thrown out the window like a week later. Like, nobody referred to it anymore. So it was like, in my head, I'm like, yeah, like, we're going to document it and we're going to be really clear. And it was nice for like a high level direction of like how we want to think about creating content. But you're right, like on the day-to-day level, or like it's not like we're referring back to it 24/7, being like, well, we said we were gonna do these three things. Like, we have to, no, like things change so fast and constantly. So I really like that. What I'm curious about is, do all the verticals tie up into a cohesive strategy, or are they kind of siloed? Like, do you try to think about how it all comes together? I know you talked about really making it vertical specific is important. I just don't know if there's any like interconnection between all of that different content.
I have a kind of a different content strategy going on right now. Multiple marketing campaigns that are focused, some on specific verticals and some that are very agnostic. And it can be even for the same event that we're putting on. If you focus the invite towards, say, for example, healthcare, and talk about some terminology or mention that a healthcare business is going to be at that event, then you're able to cater that invite to them. Whereas you can also just make a really general one.
Yeah, It's such a hard balance to strike. And like, again, I felt very fortunate that my audience was so like, we were B2B SaaS in a very particular set of like funded startups. Like it wasn't, I didn't have to also try to figure out what's important to like company CFOs that have IPO'd recently. It was so specific. And I was like, it's hard to do content no matter what, but I have a lot of respect, like just for you having to keep all of this straight in your head. Cause in outside looking in, I'm like, thank God I didn't have to do that at Mosaic. I don't know how I'd be moving around so quickly between all of these. So I want to know, like, what does your day look like? How do you prioritize your time? How do you decide? Like, I'm sure there's competing interests across many verticals. You mentioned talking to people on the team. I want to dig into that, know what the tactical resource allocation looks like for you.
So because I'm a team of one, I have learned how to really use my SMEs that are within my organization to help me produce content. We have also incentivized that with marketing bonuses, with different things that will drive them to want to contribute. And it also helps contribute, I feel, in a way to the company culture because we work together as a team to produce all of this. I would say in a week, we have multiple syncs with different departments. I have a marketing sync every 2 weeks with everyone from both practices, and we talk about content strategy or what's upcoming. I have a sales sync every single week and ask my sales team, okay, what do you need from me? Actually going to them and having that open dialogue is invaluable. It's extremely important to make sure that marketing is not siloed away from the other departments, especially when you're in an org that has a team of one as the marketing department. You cannot operate on your own. So you need to look at where you are.
I need to get to the conversations. That's where this conversation should go, is like what those conversations look like. But I need to go back. You mentioned you had marketing bonuses for your SMEs. Tell me more if you can about how you're incentivizing these people, because we talked about that a lot in my last role, and I've never figured out what the right balance was. I would love to know more about that.
So we also have made that a little bit agile in the sense that, so we have a scale of different things, different levels of things. So for example, blog posts are a smaller amount than webinars. Developing webinar content, that's one of our largest bonuses. Conference presentations are one of our largest bonuses.
Incredible.
Yeah. And so that has really made a difference in motivating people. And we can also say we have a scoped out webinar schedule, but we don't have as many blog posts. We'll temporarily change that amount and up it to incentivize it a little bit more. I also try to tell them or get an idea of what subjects they're able to produce, and also listen to what I'm hearing from the sales team, what they're hearing out in the field as to what people want to hear about. And that's kind of how we base our content.
This is great. I love this. I was always in that I was very fortunate. A lot of SMEs, like we were a small company, but I had people that I could go to who were basically in the seat before they were at Mosaic. And so I knew that they had day-to-day expert knowledge on what I needed, but never got the incentives over the line. I think this is great. Is that part of, where does that sit in the budget? Do you just have a monthly or a quarterly budget for essentially internal bonuses for the team? How does the company, or how do you as the marketing lead think about that?
So yeah, there is budget set aside for that. For each of our practices, we try to do one webinar a month. We've kind of worked out an idea of what we're looking at per year based on that. We can throw out a bulk number every year and kind of guess based on past what they're going to produce so that we at least have somewhat of an idea of what we're going to pay out per year.
Love that. That made me curious what the cadence is. Like, how much content are you producing? You said one webinar a month per
per pro-
practice, which I would assume is per vertical. Is that a line there?
not per vertical. Well, per vertical relating to the actual platform that we're implementing. So, yeah, and so we have usually an average of 2 webinars a month is what
Right.
we're aiming for. Sometimes we have more, sometimes we have less. It depends on what activities we are working out with our partner companies, because sometimes they want to partner with us on webinars as well.
Yep.
Sometimes they want to leverage customers that have a great customer story. So, like next month, I have 4 webinars. So
That's crazy. My last tactical question, I want to get back to the conversations with other people on the team. How much are you, I'm sure there's a mix and I'm sure it changes from month to month or even day to day. How much do you create? Are you a content creator? Or are you taking input from other people and putting things in practice? Sounds like we're leaning a lot on the SMEs, which is awesome. I think the more that you can be like the glue between everything is probably ideal. But as a one person show, it's like, how much are you tasked with actually like sitting down and doing kind of the grunt work of putting it out there?
I'll say, especially in the past year, I have learned to get what I can from my SMEs, and then I curate ChatGPT and other AI to help refine it a little bit more. Use Grammarly, use whatever I need to, run it through as much stuff as I possibly can to get a really cohesive message using all of the knowledge from my SMEs. So they will give me a bare bones document and I will take it from there. I'll produce the graphics. I'll produce, get a really polished document out of using AI, editing myself, piecemealing together to get something that looks really, really good. And then I send it back to them for final approval and we go from there.
I love that. I used to say, I think personally, it's one of the bigger mistakes like content people make is thinking like whatever draft they like, especially from an SME, it's like that it's going to be in like marketing form. Like it's going to be like you just throw it out on the website. And it's like, I always said, even just for
No.
marketing freelancers, like if I can get something from somebody else that's like 50-60% of the way there, and I just like have to kick it over the line, like with formatting or just like, I'm like thrilled. But I know some people get something back and they look at it and they're like, I don't know, it's not done. Like, why isn't it done? It's like, no, like the SMEs are there for the subject matter expertise. They're not there because they know how to put blog post outlines together and like format it right for the website and put images in and things like that. So I love that. I'm totally aligned with you there. Can't expect the world,
Yeah. And what I tell my consultants and SMEs the most is I need the meat of what you're looking
Yes.
for, what you're trying to express. And
Yes.
I can do the rest. I can pretty it up. I can edit, just give me the meat.
Yes. Same wavelength. I love it. My context is I would get so much information from the sales team. And it's like, it's really easy to become like, I'm just insert. It's like they could ask for 100 things. It's like, great, I'll do every one of them because the sales team said it. So there's got to be an act of like filtering what they give you and deciding like how we move forward with the right content that will help the company. So it's like, great, I got all that info. Like, what do I do with it now? And how do you like work through that in conversation? So I know you were giving an example, but that's where I'm thinking.
So generally, we go by volume. So we go by, have we heard that this is a need from multiple sources? If we've heard it 1, 2, 3, 4 times, anything more than 2 or 3 times, that's a definite for me as far as, okay, let's seriously look at developing some content. We also look at the market. Do we have a pulse on the number of customers around this vertical? For example, we have high amounts of manufacturing. Some of our others are SaaS, health sciences, retail, hospitality. So if we're hearing the same thing, and sometimes it can be as specific as, I want to hear about flash forecasting. I want to hear about advanced daily balance or something as specific as that, then we'll really start, okay, can we do a blog post? What is the easiest to produce the fastest? And is this something that we want to look at a webinar a month from now? Or is this something that's very passing, and maybe we only do 1 or 2 pieces of content on it? And is that going to satisfy the customer base that we have interested right now?
I love that. So I know we've talked about sales team. We've talked about like an SME, like basically the consultants at the company who are actually doing the work on the front line. Are there any other like regular meetings you have in place to kind of gather content ideas? Like maybe like I had a customer success team before, like who else is involved? Who else are you looking to, if any?
Honestly, every single facet and team in our company is involved in marketing in some way or shape or form. Program management or project management, they help us out with reminding people to finish their case studies as they're implementing. And our managed services division, we talk to them on a fairly regular basis. They're included in all of the main marketing syncs, so that we're producing content around our managed services offerings. Additionally, I would say, obviously we have to have, no, I wouldn't say that accounting is necessarily directly involved in content production, but definitely a consideration if we're talking about bigger things like webinars or conference presentations or some of those bigger ticket items that we kind of need to strategize.
I've got one last question for you, Jennifer. I'm going to zoom way out. I used to do this with my old podcast for Mosaic, and it was just like I had one career-oriented question that was just something I collect from everyone. So I'm trying to think of how I do that for this show, again, since you're my pilot guest. And so where I landed was like, I'm curious if there's one thing you think that many teams or brands get wrong about content strategy. Like, what is your biggest tip on what people should be doing on this front?
I would say definitely not utilizing the content that you have and turning it into an evergreen funnel. Specifically with things like webinars, or if you have content already produced, how can you repurpose that? How can you span that out over all of your marketing channels? If you have a blog post, if you have an idea already formed, is that something that you can turn into a webinar? Is that something that you can use to speak to a customer about or develop a white paper around? Also, can you take little clips of your webinar and turn it into a little teaser or informational post that you can post on your website as a how-to?
100% the same page. It's like, especially with, I really like the focus on webinars here because I think they are so underutilized. Like they just sit and collect dust. People put them behind a gate on the website and they're on demand, and everyone has like on demand webinars, but like the live people or who's going to really cut, like not many people are going to come sign up for an on demand webinar in many cases. So like the more you can stretch that further after the fact, like the better off you're going to be. I love that. It's something that I always focused on in my last role. And also like as New North, like that's just what we are built around, because I don't know how else you do marketing at this point if you're not doing that. It's like if you're going to put all that effort into one asset, why would you just let it collect dust on the website in the back pages of a resource tab or something,
Well, and that's why you go out and, for a lot of, like, if we have done a webinar a month or two ago, why not repost it on social media? Hey, did you miss our webinar on this subject? And we get views off of that. We do the same thing in email as well. If you have a good contact list that you think might be interested, if it's a vertical targeted webinar, why not blast it out again and see if you can get any interest? One of our most recent conversions was off of our on-demand web, and that's because they saw our content and went to our website, saw 3, 4, 5 content pieces, and were immediately sold on our expertise. So, and it manifested into a couple $1 million deal. So,
God.
Yeah.
It's marketing, modern marketing.
Mhm.
Love to hear it. All right, Jennifer, thank you for taking the time. That was the end of my questions. I will just open the floor to you. Where can people connect with you? Anything you have to plug? Where can people learn more about the work that you're doing? Anything you want to call out? The floor is yours.
Yeah, so you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm the marketing director of MindStream Analytics. So feel free to connect with me there. I also do consulting work on the side. So if you need any consulting help with regards to marketing, please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. Also, I would say that I would be definitely open to discuss opportunities to help you and your team, come up with content ideas. So, yeah.
Cool. Well, Jennifer, a pleasure chatting. Yeah, just really glad I could have you on as a Content Head's first guest. Looking forward to getting this out to people, and I don't know, maybe we'll do it again another time soon.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much, Joe.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Content Head podcast. One thing before you go, I'd love to hear your thoughts about today's topic. Send a note to contentheadshow@gmail.com and let me know what's on your mind. And if you liked the episode, be sure to follow Content Head wherever you listen to your podcasts. I'll see you on the next one.